Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in.
Hello.
Erik Torenberg.
Hey, good to see you.
Great to see you, man. So I'm talking to a new general partner at Andreessen Horowitz.
Yes. Our first episode in the A16Z era. And you've been a long time friend of the firm, and so yes, stoked.
Yes, I'm just my connections to A16Z continue to multiply.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. How's how are things going on your end?
Pretty good. Getting back in the swing of things after the Japan trip. Yeah, birthday was fun. I missed you there.
Yeah. No, I saw the videos. It was pretty epic.
Well, let's do something soon.
Yeah. No, that'd be fun. You need to get karaoke again. I appreciated your Black Mirror reviews. I didn't know you were such a fan.
Oh yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of Black Mirror. It's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah. For people who haven't watched it, what do you think is the strongest pitch, or what do you think is a big contribution?
Strongest pitch? I mean, like it's the only place where you get it's the only place where you get like a bunch of different smart sci-fi concepts week after week. Like in the old days, you'd get that. I mean, well, there was always the Twilight Zone. There's always like, Outer Limits or something, but then, which was just a honestly bad knockoff of the Twilight Zone. And then there was Star Trek, right? In Star Trek, you'd get every week would be like this episodic like exploration of another technology. And now Star Trek is still good. Strange New Worlds is still great, but you don't get, that exploration of the implications of technology as much now. It's more about like workplace drama and the relationships between the characters, and less, about like, oh, what if there were this cool technology? And I think it's just less nerdy show. So where do you get your nerdiness? And not just nerdiness, but like there's some shows that have an extended premise, like right, like that, like a personality upload, and it'll just do this like the show Upload. And but then Black Mirror has a different thing every time. Although, to be honest, they've been leaning pretty hard on personality upload in the most recent season. But they like, one week it'll be about games, and then the next week it'll be about like, sort of like social media rating systems, and then there's like all these just different technologies that it kind of explores, and it also has this sensibility that I really like, which is this British punk sensibility. And because Charlie Brooker is just like, he's a British punk. And if you know that type of guy, it's like, they're very fun. They're way too cynical. They're way too like downbeat. They're way too just like, but they're fun and smart and rebellious. And I like that about the British punks.
Yeah. Yeah, the two most moving episodes for me were the one that you talked about, the social credit score, but also the one where someone's like boyfriend dies, but she's trying to like bring him back to life.
That's right. The one with the social media rating is called Nosedive. Social credit is called Nosedive, and the other one you're referring to is Be Right Back.
Yeah. And I was like, oh wow, that really foreshadowed some of this like AI friend, and pretty soon you put bodies next to it. It's like, wow.
We have the technology to like upload everything someone wrote and then have you talk to a chatbot version of them. Like that's real now. That came out just a few years after the episode.
So
Yeah, and it works, pretty well. People have fairly high satisfaction with that. They know they're not talking to the real person, actually.
well, even if so it's funny because it works well in the sense that people use it. I actually think it's like, it's only going to get so much better. Like, I've seen people talk to the replicas or character AIs, and I'm like, wow, this seems so obviously fake, and yet people still love it. And so I think the demand for this is going to be huge, just as it gets better.
Right. One thing you learn as a writer is that a lot of people, how they engage with your writing is they read a lot into it. So of course, when you have the writings of like a, imaginary dead person, they're going to read a lot into it, and they're going to, it'll be like people who believe they're talking to the spirit of their dead loved one. But this is just like an enhanced assisted version of that. It's really mostly people just remembering, imagining, reading stuff in. It's like, that's how our brains work. But that's cool. And so, and in that episode, things go wrong. Spoiler, things go wrong when they bring in like a creepy android version of the guy.
Yeah.
It's just, don't get the creepy android, man.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. You don't want those green dots. Let's Let's go to Trump, because you wrote an interesting piece where you sort of reflected on sort of the best case scenario that you tried to outline, a few months ago, and now you've also outlined the worst case scenario. So let's put them side by side a little bit. What was the original hope around the best case scenario, and then what's the worst case scenario?
Right. So the best case scenario was basically Trump until 2019, where basically, Trump yelled a lot and he spent a lot of his time yelling at various people and then they yelled back. And there was a lot of yelling in our society, but nothing bad really happened. The economy still had an investment boom. Wages went up. Everybody made money. It was a great time, economically in America. It was a contentious time socially and a time of unrest socially, where people screamed about politics and race and, gender and just all that stuff all day. And that sucked. But then like economically it was fine. And if you just kept your head down and like built companies or, like made money or whatever, then like the late 2010s were a great time before the pandemic. And so that was sort of the best case scenario that I thought, just repeat of that. And it's not implausible, right? Like I thought there's obvious reasons why it wouldn't be the same as before, but I thought that those might be wrong. There's always a chance that it'll just be like round two of the same thing. I thought, oh, my intellectually, I think there's good reasons to think this will be a lot worse, but then there's always the chance that I'm just wrong. But it didn't turn out that way. It was worse.
And you saw that pretty quickly after.
It took until tariffs for me to really see that. So, I mean, there was Doge, which is new, right? And I thought that was the big new thing of the Trump administration was now there's Elon, he's in the administration now, sort of. And he's brought a level of competence to this administration that the first one didn't have. And I wrote that post about how Elon is a competent guy and only fools deny this. So I was like, okay, so now Trump has a really smart guy working for him. This is going to change things. And Doge seemed to be the way that it was changing things. So it seems like my whole initial idea about what was going to be different about this administration is turning out not to be as big a deal as I thought. But then came Liberation Day, and then came tariffs. We had a preview with the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, and then he just decided to put massive tariffs on everyone in the world, then take them away, then put them back, then take them away, then put them back, then, who the fuck knows what's going on, but it's really smashing the economy. It's like, this is what a cranky 80-year-old guy who just watches too much CNN in like 1992 would have done if you just gave him absolute power. He'll just like do one stupid thing one week and then another stupid thing next week, because, the early 90s is probably the last time that Trump's view of what's going on in the world really got updated.
And so maybe let's segue now to the worst case, which is basically a de-industrialization of America, which is the opposite of what he's trying to do. Why don't you lay out this case?
Right. Okay. So the basic naive thinking of Trumpism is that if you put tariffs on all the foreign manufactured stuff coming into America, then American manufacturing will replace it. So, for example, you have like foreign-made TVs, Americans buying foreign-made TVs. Well, if you don't allow Americans to buy foreign-made TVs, they'll just buy American-made TVs instead, and some TV maker will make them for you. That's a very simplistic way of thinking about it, and there's a number of reasons why this is probably wrong. The first reason is that tariffs make you poorer, and when you're poor, you buy less stuff. So Americans are going to be poorer, and as they're going to buy fewer TVs. So that's going to eat into the like number of extra TVs that Americans will start making. So suppose that we import 1,000 TVs and then we cut that off, and then like you're expecting America to produce 1,000 more, but people get poor, so they buy only, let's say, 800 more TVs. Then that cuts 200 into what you thought you were going to get. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is export manufacturing. So we hurt our exports, first of all, because we become uncompetitive, right? If you can't buy those imported components, then you're not a competitive exporter, right? So we import more than we export. Everyone focuses on this trade deficit, this net amount, but the total amount that we export, the gross amount, is actually pretty huge. So if we start eating into that, then suppose then that takes away like 300 more TVs that we make that we were making to sell to foreigners, right? So now that's instead of 1,000, you've only got a 500 increase in TVs. Okay. And so then on top of that, people start shifting their consumption taste towards services. So if TVs become expensive, I'm going to just like watch shit on my laptop or my phone, Okay, I'm going to buy fewer things, maybe buy subscriptions to more streaming services, use my money for that, or just spend my free time, doing stuff. I won't get the big nice TV. I'll shift towards services. I'll go on vacation more. I'll spend more on healthcare. I'll, get like a nice foot massage. I don't know, whatever people spend their money on, consuming experiences instead of goods, right? You've heard of this. So then that'll happen. And so then, so suppose people switch their consumption habits, and then that's another 100 TVs that we don't make. So now we're down. I'm just making up numbers, obviously, but it's just illustrating this principle. Now we're down to like 400 more TVs instead of 1,000 more TVs that we're going to make, right? That's going to provide us with those TV manufacturing jobs and whatnot. Okay, now, but here's the thing. Now TV makers have to source all their stuff domestically. So that means that now you have to go out and mine your minerals to make your goddamn TV in the country. So now you've got to go get more miners. So you had the White House release this really nasty looking illustration, like, how about a job in mining? And it like looked like people with like lung disease from coal mining. It looked like people with just a lifetime of like bodily destruction from mining jobs. It was not a good advertisement for mining, working in a mine. We're going to have to do that. So then, add some mining jobs there too. So then you take away that, and then say that's another 100 TVs. And now on top of all that, you get recession. Okay. Panic, crisis of confidence, blah, blah, blah. So say that takes away another like couple hundred TVs. Now you're down to zero. So like, it could be that you add up all these factors, and it could be that actually the number of people in America who works making TVs actually goes down from cutting off foreign TVs. That seems weird. Or not just TVs, but all these other components as well. Because remember, if you just target one product from one country, like Chinese EVs, not much is going to happen, right? You'll just buy EVs from elsewhere, or you'll, whatever. It's just one product. It's just one country. It's not a big deal. But if you cut off like all products from all places, then you're really fucked. You push yourself down the value chain. Your manufacturers can't get scale. You can't specialize. It's just like you're in trouble. And, everybody gets poorer. People shift their consumption away. And, it's like you look at the countries that did all this import substitution in the like 70s and 80s, like Argentina and whatnot. Like, they're not industrialized. These are not industrialized countries. People do not do a lot of manufacturing there. And so like, you want to be like that. It's not true that protecting the economies of Argentina and Nigeria and all these places, it's not true that that resulted in everybody working in a factory. You don't just rewind history. Like, things are different now. You can't just like roll it back. And yes, competition with China and whatnot did destroy a lot of our manufacturing jobs, but saying that you just do tariffs until we don't trade with China anymore, and then the manufacturing jobs will come back. That's like saying, like I dropped an egg off the shelf and it shattered on my floor. All I've got to do is pick it up and the egg will reform. Well, no, it won't. There's hysteresis in the system. There's like, path to penance in the system. Anyway, there you go.
Economists on the more conservative side, like, let's talk about Oren Cass. Like, what is he saying right now?
By the way, Oren Cass has a law degree.
Oh, really?
He's not an economist.
So he's not an economist.
No, he's an econ blogger. I'm an econ blogger with a PhD. He's an econ blogger with a law degree. Maybe makes me a little better than him, but fundamentally, he's not any more of an expert than I am, and possibly less. And so yeah, Oren Cass, but he's like kind of like the best they can get. Okay, and I've been friendly with Oren Cass for years. We've done joint events together. We've gone to conferences together. And I was very hopeful for what Oren Cass could provide for the Republican Party, because he's always been pro-industrial policy, which I am too. And I thought that this would be net good, because he would, I thought that Biden's industrial policy will succeed. Therefore, Republicans will want to put their own flavor, their own spin on this, and they'll come in and they'll want their own version of industrial policy. That'll succeed also. And they'll get a guy like Oren Cass to write it for them. That's what I thought was going to happen. I was wrong. Instead, what happened is that Trump either made it up himself based on shit he saw on CNN in 1992, or he got Peter Ritardo to, like tell him how that, like, if you just raise tariffs high enough, trade deficits magically appear and GDP number go up, like, and factories will sprout from the plain like mushrooms after the rain. And so Oren Cass was left out in the cold. So Oren Cass then had to make a decision. Does he defend what the Trump administration is doing, or does he break with them? And that was a hard decision to make, but he decided to defend the Trump administration tooth and nail.
But was he always kind of sympathetic to tariffs, or do you feel like he evolved his position?
He always thought that tariffs were part of a successful reindustrialization strategy, which, to be honest, I did too, although not this kind of tariff. I wanted like specific, targeted tariffs on like strategic products that China could try to choke off. Like, so for example, not having all our like chips made in China is very important. So like I thought strategic tariffs on China were important, but I thought it was a relatively minor piece of our reindustrialization strategy. And I think that Oren probably thought it was a bit of a bigger piece, but his main focus was still industrial policy, as just like me. Promoting industries to do instead of telling us what, instead of just cutting off every industry from its sort of economic base.
We'll continue our interview in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. It's a bull market. It's a bear market. Rates will rise or fall. Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days and not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/102. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102. Every time I hop on the 101 freeway in SF, I look up at the various tech billboards and think, damn, turpentine should definitely be up there. And I bet I'm not alone. In a world of endless scrolling and ad blockers, sometimes the most powerful way to reach people is in the real world. That's where AdQuick comes in. The easiest way to book out-of-home ads, like billboards, vehicle wraps, and airport displays. The same way you would order an Uber. Started by Instacart alums, AdQuick was born from their own personal struggles to book and measure ad success. AdQuick's audience targeting, campaign management, and analytics bring the precision and efficiency of digital to the real world. Ready to get your brand the attention it deserves? Visit adquick.com today to start reaching your customers in the real world. Again, that's adquick.com. Have you ruled out the possibility, or do you think it's extremely unlikely that what will happen in 90 days is we'll actually have more free trade and that some of these will be walked back and they will, be successfully used as negotiating leverage with other countries to drop their stuff? Or do you think that sort of cat has left the station, or train has left the station on that?
Did you say the cat has left the station?
I was going to say the cat has left the bag. I can't remember. The cat's out the bag.
Oh, but were you thinking of the cat bus from Totoro, from Miyazaki?
Yeah.
In fact, Japan has made like cat bus and cat train, I think.
Oh, wow. That's funny. Dude, you make a cat anything, it'll be good.
You really can. The cat has left the station. Although when you get a pet, I'm going to suggest a rabbit instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Join the bunny legions, Erik.
It's part of the ongoing movement.
And all right, so I don't know, but first of all, what seems obvious, and the criticism that everyone's making, and what seems obvious, is that you can't do 90 deals in 90 days. They haven't even done one deal yet. They might announce like one deal. Someone said they'll announce a deal with Japan. Someone else said making a trade deal with Japan is like taking your sister to the prom.
Why is that? It's just not right.
Because Japan, yeah, it's like, Japan's pretty dependent on us trade wise, and like China's not. So then it's not one deal has come out. How many days has it been since Liberation Day? Liberation Day was what, April 2? It's been 50 days since April 2, and we haven't seen a single deal.
So you think it's unlikely, basically?
I don't know. You tell me. Like 50 days and 0 deals. Like, do you think suddenly we'll just make like 100 deals in a day? No. I mean, is there the possibility that Trump will just walk back everything and claim that like other people doing some cosmetic bullshit represents a deal, like he did for Canada and Mexico in like the first time? Maybe. But notice what he did with Canada and Mexico. He said, the first month, he said, oh, they did this and this and this. Canada agreed to crack down on fentanyl, so we're pausing tariffs. But then he kept the tariffs after that. After the initial pause, he kept them.
Right.
And so he didn't, he pressed on through. He's a lame duck, despite whatever you hear about third term. I mean, he's just too old, right? He's a lame duck. This is it. He's just like, he fears no rivals. There's no one who can really stand up to him. Elon can't stand up to him. And so like nothing's going to stop him. Congress could stop him at any minute. Congress could simply pass a law saying tariff authority is no longer in the hands of the president, because the Constitution reserves this power for Congress. And all the tariffs could go poof tomorrow. Congress isn't making a peep. So Trump really doesn't feel like there's any concerted pushback. Congress isn't pushing back. CEOs aren't really pushing back, although privately they're horrified. But like in public, it's the manufacturing CEOs they just want exemptions from the tariff. So they hope that they can use corruption and backdoor sort of job owning and special favor pleading and whatever. So they're not speaking out, because if they speak out, they'll be targeted by the administration. So Trump fears nothing, and there's no real reason for him to walk. I mean, why would he walk the tariffs back? So the one thing that can happen is capital flight. Some of that is happening now. The dollar keeps going down, whereas bond yields keep going up. That's a sign of capital flight, because it means that what's happening is that people are dumping American bonds and moving their money out of the country. They're selling U.S. government bonds and they're moving their money out of the country. We talked about that last episode. And so that's ongoing. We're still seeing some of that. And so, but if that keeps going on, it could make Trump worried about his legacy, because he said the one president I don't want to be is Herbert Hoover, but you get capital flight, you become Herbert Hoover real fast.
Yeah. And contrast this approach to the Biden approach, because you get into that a little bit in the piece around why you didn't have to worry in the same way.
Right. So Biden's approach was to basically not disrupt most of the workings of the economy and to add stuff on top of it. I really like this addition of stuff instead of, disruption of stuff. I'm a growth oriented kind of guy. And so what Biden said is, okay, well, we need more semiconductor manufacturing. We need more battery manufacturing and other green tech affiliated things, which is really just energy tech. They paint it as a climate thing to get all these Democratic activists on board, but really it's just about energy. Green energy is really just modern energy, right? Talk to Casey Hanmer about this. We should get Casey on the podcast. So, smart guy will tell you exactly why green energy is just like new energy. So, we did that, and then it was like, okay, we need to manufacture those things. Let's use a new kind of policy, industrial policy, like targeted subsidies. So the point is that everyone's like, oh, well, then it'll just be on life support. It'll be subsidies, blah, blah, blah. But what happened was that we committed a relatively small amount of subsidies, and private companies committed huge amounts of private capital. Like the amount of private capital relative to the amount of private subsidies was like 10x. It was massive. And so it turned out that all you need to do is sort of nudge industry in like a specific direction and say, okay, the guys, this is where we're going to build now. And then industry would just do it. So that was incredibly successful. And TSMC Arizona was sort of the flagship project of this. And at first there were hitches when the Biden administration stupidly tried to force the project to hire only union labor in a state where there's almost no union labor. That was dumb. But then they came in and they renegotiated, and they, said, we'll hire like a few union guys, but really we'll just hire a bunch of Taiwanese guys to build this. And it worked. And then the thing got ahead of schedule and started producing even more advanced chips than they thought, with yields that were better than Taiwan. That means we're actually being more careful and exacting than Taiwan. Actually, if it were yields better than Japan, I would be incredibly impressed. But honestly, Taiwan's kind of laid back and a little bit sloppy, and lost my appointment at a hospital and gets my order wrong at Starbucks a lot of the time. So honestly, maybe getting better yields than Taiwan isn't quite as big an accomplishment. If you get yields better than Japan, you're God. If you get yields better than Taiwan, you're pretty good. So, but anyway, we did, and it was this big success, and I was very encouraged by that. At the same time, the Biden administration did some stuff that just totally fucking failed and flopped. Remember rural broadband? We're going to give broadband to all the people in the rural areas. Not one, and Kamala became the czar of the rural broadband. Not one house was connected. Zero. Because as Mark Dunkelman, Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson would tell us, progressives have spent the last half century setting up a whole bunch of procedural barriers to specifically government, where the private sector can still get stuff done, but then there's barriers to what government can do specifically with NEPA and a million other things. So government's hands are tied. And so we tried to do this rural broadband thing through the government, just became a money pit. But then all the interest groups were happy because, oh, we get jobs doing nothing, right? Free jobs. Yay. So that was a big debacle. And then the EV chargers, remember the government was going to build all these EV chargers? They built like 7. Another complete debacle for the exact same reason. The third one was transmission lines. That's a little different because it's usually private companies who build that. But in that case, the regulations were just so insane that it wasn't possible to build transmission to connect new like solar power to the grid in a lot of places, especially on the East Coast. And so Texas is fine because Texas has ERCOT, which has a really good grid system. But then other places was really hard. So transmission became this problem. So the Biden administration succeeded at getting people to start building a lot of chip and battery factories and utterly failed at EV chargers, rural broadband, and transmission. So what do you do? So I had to decide how much am I going to yell at the Biden administration for sucking and how much am I going to praise them for like inventing a new kind of policy that actually looked like it was doing something. I think I tried to strike a balance between that, or at least I ended up striking balance because the way I decide what to write about is not like, in order to curry influence is actually just like, what am I thinking today? I'll write that. And so it's just like, it's very instinctive. It was not purposeful, but if it had been purposeful, I probably would have chosen about the same balance that I eventually got.
Yeah. And so was the hope that Trump would be this like Malay type figure? Because you've come around, I think, or you've become more sympathetic to Malay's sort of impact on Argentina. And was the hope that he would do something similar or with similar positive effect? Or has he been like a poor man's Malay, or is that the wrong sort of analogy?
Yeah, so I've become generally much more sympathetic to like libertarianism. Libertarians, I felt that there were a lot of drawbacks to the libertarian idea, and I also saw the libertarian movement had some people in it who were just schmucks. But for those two reasons, I was always very hard on the libertarians, especially because in economics, when you go to an economics PhD, the libertarian culture within those programs will be hell of a lot stronger than it is within the general populace. So people always fight the enemy they see. They fight the close enemy. And so to me, intellectually, like libertarians were the people saying stuff that like I didn't jive with because those are the people around me. Okay. And so I fought them on blogs too hard. What I didn't realize is that libertarianism had been a way of diverting right-wing energies in a more or less positive direction instead of in the direction, because what I noticed was that the right in other countries looks very different than the American right used to look. Okay, the American right was very libertarian, whereas the right in Japan or the right in France is very statist and protectionist, and it's very ethnocentric. And what I now realize is that that's the normal way for a country to be, and that we have normalized in that way. I'm going to write a post about this. I owe the libertarians an apology is the name of the post. Because libertarianism was this weird moment when Americans could, I mean, the apology is only partial because libertarianism does have lots of real drawbacks. There's a lot of like boneheaded, like unrealistic theory in there. Like when Brian Kaplan's like, well, the government shouldn't do any STEM research at all. Like, yes, it should. Shut up. Like, and there honestly were a lot of jerks in the libertarian movement who have now all exited to MAGA and become anti-libertarians. So like, I don't owe them a complete apology because I was right to see those issues. Okay. And I was right that the libertarianism's long-term issues, long-term failure to address some of its weaknesses would kind of come back to bite it and the rest of us too. I was right about some of the people in the movement, but what I was wrong about, I didn't realize how destructive right-wing movements could be if they didn't go for libertarianism. Divorced from the business community, divorced from the idea of promoting business. I didn't realize that what do you have when you don't have business, when you don't care about businesses making money? On the right, you have ethnocentrism, you have xenophobia, protectionism, you have just culture wars. That's what the right becomes. And cronyism, right? Maybe not protecting business in general, but protecting specific big businesses who are allied with the state, oligarchy things. When you look at Orban, you look at Erdogan, you look at especially Putin, you see these sort of rightoids. This is their version of the right. It's oligarchic, it's corrupt, it's militaristic, it's xenophobic, it's ethnocentric, it's, all these dumb things. It's like a version of if the Japanese right just went, got real stupid. Japan has a lot of these things too on the right, but they are pragmatic and smart about it. And the rightists, like Abe was on the right, yet he was pretty smart in terms of his policies and very flexible, ideologically flexible. But then, Putin looked like he was smart until he didn't. And Erdogan has gotten pretty lucky. And so, but on a lot of these guys don't look that smart. And so I didn't realize what the right would become. Do you read fantasy at all? You ever read the Mistborn books?
No, I never read it.
Oh, I can't make that reference anyway.
And when you're referring to the right and what it tends to become, you're referring to kind of like a set of impulses that are around sort of nativism, hierarchy, homogenization, maybe, tradition.
Right. Hierarchy is a good way to put it. Tradition maybe, but I would say more respect for the idea of tradition than tradition itself. So I really think it's, the right of my youth, the Christian right, lived that Christianity. They would go pray every morning. They lived it. It was a grassroots thing. Whereas for the MAGA right, Christianity is more of like a historical heritage thing. It's like they'll post like Deus Vult memes and like imagine the Crusades all day, fantasize about that stuff. Like then how awesome Europe was when it was so Christian, blah, blah, blah. But then they don't go to church. Oh, and then you have, what's interesting is you've got like a little Catholic Protestant schism going on the right here. Anyway, but that's the impulse of the modern right is a tent shrinking impulse. And I think Trump 2024 was an anomaly when a lot of people just sort of crowded into this tent because they've been kicked out of the Democrats' tent, because the Democrats' tent shrinking impulse is even stronger. Everyone wants to shrink their tent and purify because everything's memes, everything's a subscription model, everything's online like food fights. Anyway, that deserves a longer post, which I'm going to write soon, called America, What Went Wrong? And the answer is that our society was uniquely vulnerable to the downsides of the technologies we invented. That's my answer. I don't know if that's the actual answer.
But why were we uniquely susceptible? You mean relative to other countries?
Yeah, relative to other countries. So like America was very spread out and diverse. We were diverse, not just, racially, which is what everyone thinks of. That was there, obviously. But then more importantly, we were diverse geographically, ideologically, economically, and all these things. We had massive diversity along every scale. And what we did was sort ourselves, right? So all the libs, you grew up in a conservative Texas town, you're a lib, you moved to San Francisco, whatever, right? Now you're with your people. And so that's what we did. And then social media came, especially not social media as in like I posted my butt implants on Instagram social media, but like, social media like Twitter, you spend all day just like posting memes and dunking on people, like that public argument social media, which Facebook was for like a few years and then quit. And now Twitter still is, and Blue Sky and whatnot. And then like Reddit, I suppose. But then like social media flung us all together into one room again. And suddenly all these people who had spent half a century dealing with their differences by spreading out and by sorting themselves and by avoiding each other and by agreeing to disagree, suddenly had to live with each other as neighbors again in online space. When our social lives went from, church and company and like university to this, which is where we all live now, right? We live in that little black mirror. When that happened, it was like Sartre's No Exit. Okay, hell is other people. Hell is other Americans. We all started living in one room together. And that disrupted our society. And of course, all these other societies, people were already living in the same room together because they had dense cities, more homogenous populations, more unifying cultural institutions. Like in France, like everybody's living in Paris. It's like the same guys you interact with in meat space, you now interact with online in the French internet or Japan. But then America, we uniquely leveraged our ability to sort. So if you think about it, back in like 2007 or something, rednecks in Alabama and communists in Oakland were in the same country. And although they wouldn't have got along if they met each other, there was no conflict between them, basically. Sometimes we would vote for like Bush or Obama or whoever. Like there were national elections and there was like, talk radio that would yell about like those hippies over in San Francisco, like in, or then like those rednecks over in Texas. And you'd yell about these distant people a little bit, but you wouldn't meet them. You never fought them. They never imposed their morality on you. They never called you out for anything. They never tried to cancel you. They never boycotted you. They were far away. You had red states and blue states. we were like that, and France was not, and Japan was not, right? And so, but then we had this unique ability to have rednecks in rural Alabama and communists in, suburban Bay Area get along fundamentally and be part of the same country in these functioning institutions that work equivalently well for both those people. And then they were destroyed like that by Twitter. They flung us all into the same room, and we couldn't handle that because our whole society had been built on this sorting and separating, spreading out. We couldn't spread out anymore. The frontier was compressed to a black hole. That's my thesis. I don't know if that's right, but that's my thesis.
And any ideas as to what can help address them? Address this?
Okay, so there's one possibility is that we get a homogenized culture via being forced to sort of like fight each other a lot over the course of a couple centuries. We just have social media stays our dominant mode of interaction, and we like intense conformity pressure and conflict forges a homogenization because we were forced to learn to get along, which is how Japan and France got like that, right? Like, people didn't always get along then. There was this French Revolution, remember that? There was, a million Japanese civil wars that people don't know because they don't know Japanese history, but there were. And then just centuries of conflict and just people just knifing each other constantly. And then people just learned to get along over time because they had to. We could have that, but social media version over centuries. Or we could refragment. We could say, we could have Elon Musk crash like a meteor into Twitter and destroy it. And that helps along a natural process of people realizing they don't need to be on these apps. And young people drift away from Twitter. They drift away from Blue Sky. They drift to Discord groups and group chats and, DM groups and, just texting and real life hangouts again. And we get back the fragmented internet. And the internet fragmentation could allow us to spread out again and restore America's ability to remain stable and diverse at the same time by spreading out. And so those are two possible futures I see. Then there's also the possible future where, there's just chaos, collapse. There's all kinds of more chaotic futures that I could spin for you, but I'll leave that for Black Mirror.
Yeah. Well, that's a good full circle, where we began. Maybe let's wrap this here.
Make it a quick one.
Yeah. I want to try different formats, see if people prefer the 40-minute ones or 70-minute ones. But
all right, yeah, let's do it. Do we get a good cold open with me ranting about something and saying something silly and over the top?
Yes, we always do.
Because I can start yelling things. I can start yelling like, Oren Cass, what happened to you? You were the great hope. You abandoned us. I could do that.
Yeah. Well, would you do if you wanted to come on? Would you want to talk to him or a little too?
Yeah, let's get Oren on the podcast. Let's get him. Let's get all the MAGA people. I'm ready. Let's get Chris Power too. I want to talk to that guy.
Great. Yeah, sounds good.
Let's get Sean McGuire.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll ask Sean.
Now I have to worry, by the way. Now I have to worry that since you're a big shot, I have to worry that could stuff I say get you canceled? I don't want that to happen.
No, don't worry. I'm not a big shot, and no.
I don't know. GP, that's big. GP stands for gold pieces where I'm from.
No, we're on good. We're on good terrain. It's 2025. It's a different era, and I want us to be saying interesting things or what's really happening.
Cancel culture has been canceled.
Exactly. All right. No. Until next time.
Econ 102 is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Moment of Zen, In the Arena, The Cognitive Revolution, and more. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave us a review in the App Store. You can keep up with both of our Substacks for written analysis of the topics we cover in the show at noahopinion.substack.com and eriktorenberg.substack.com. Thanks for listening.